Chris, and I think that my experience and my journey into the games industry has been a bit backwards, and so maybe, useful to talk about my pathway, because I guess there are a lot of different ways to get into any industry, and mine's a sort of more alternate route. So I guess to start off with, give you a bit of my background, I actually studied film production at Flinders, so I graduated quite a few years ago now. But I've been working in the film industry for the past 8 years, so my day job is actually as a project executive at the South Australian Film Corporation. So some people say, well, if you're in the film industry, that seems like it's really interesting. Why would you try to get into games? And it's an interesting question. I find that I've always been more interested in games than in film, to be perfectly honest, but I guess as I was going through high school, there was never any event like this that kind of made me realise I could be part of the games industry, because I guess back then it was all games are on consoles. We didn't have YouTube, we didn't have apps, we didn't have iPhones and Android and all that kind of thing. And I never saw that it was possible for me to be part of the games industry, so I pursued film instead, which has its own merits, but yeah, I'm finding that games are much more my interest now. So that production background meant that I have I guess a focus a lot on storytelling, and I have a background in sort of storytelling and storytelling theory and all that kind of thing. So that's kind of what I feel like I'm bringing to the games industry. So in 2010, I did an MRC, which is the Media Resource Centre. They had like a short course called Games Lab, and that was my first sort of introduction into game development and game design, where over a period of 6 weekends, for 2 days at a time, a group would get together in small teams and sort of, I guess a bit like a game jam, come up with a concept and try to produce a game at the end of it. We didn't end up actually completing a game, but I did get a lot of sort of, I guess, fundamental concepts of game design in that. And I thought, well, here's some tools, I might take that forward. So I thought that might be my first step into the industry. So at that point, I discovered a game engine that worked with my skills at the time. I have always kind of grown up around computers, and I spent a lot of time, playing with Photoshop and lots of different other sort of graphic design tools. And so my biggest strength is probably, or was at the time, designing and computer generated artwork and that kind of thing. So I found a game engine called Construct 2, and I might bring that up to start playing with. So that's it there. Basically, I thought what I wanted to do was make a game to complete a game, get it out into the industry, kind of show people that I'm a serious game developer, which I'm still working on. And I downloaded this program and set to work making a game called Zombies. Now, I got the idea for Zombies from a random conversation I was having with someone, and she was talking about a high concept idea for a film or a TV series about zombie bees. And I said, oh, what, like zombies? Because I thought I'd get clever. And then I started thinking, how would that translate into a game mechanic? And that's where the whole idea came from. I did some research and discovered that zombies are actually real. So there's a parasite that infects honeybees. You probably all have heard about it. Various problems affecting bees. And that causes the bees to lose their sense of direction and sort of behave like zombies. And I thought that's a really cool idea for a game mechanic, where if you play a bee and if you get infected, your controls shuffle around. And that's what underpins Zombies. So I'll show you some gameplay from that. The idea behind Zombies, let's skip forward a little bit. There. I'll sort of let that run in the background. So Zombies is a touch-based game for Android, working on the iOS version at the moment. Basically, it's a little bit like Snake in that you keep going in one direction until you tap to change direction, and I've got on-screen arrows, or this is just a normal touch version. And what you do is you go outside to collect pollen in the garden through the maze, which keeps changing, and then the aim of the game is to get through each of these levels by feeding the larva. So it's quite simple, I guess, in its concept. But it sort of gets a little bit haywire when you run out of pollen and you run into bees, the zombie bees, because it switches your controls around and you have to do everything backwards. And you're able to finish the game, and when you're infected, I think it's going to get infected in a second. But basically the idea was to create a game not where you would die if you were faced with a challenging situation, but you have to adjust your playstyle in order to be able to complete the game. And this is currently up on the Android store, so you can download it for mobile. It's another version to go. So you can see there the bee's gone green. So now he's actually backwards, and you can recover pollen by eating your babies and all that kind of thing. So it gets faster and faster as you go along. It's a little bit silly, but what I wanted to do was not just make this game, but use it as an awareness-raising, I guess, tool to let people know about bees and what problems are affecting them today. So that's essentially my first game. So what did I learn from this? I started this a couple of years ago using Construct 2. I've done it all on my own. So I've done all the graphics. I've got a composer to help with the sound as well. But other than that, I pulled it all together. I realised about halfway through that it was an enormous undertaking to do on my own, especially in my spare time around my full-time job. So I think the biggest thing I've learned out of this is to start small, because it certainly is incredibly ambitious. And it's good to have a team around you, because I spent many long hours until 3 in the morning pulling it together, and it's up on the Play Store now, but it still needs a lot of work, and now I have to start marketing it. So I think an important thing to realise when you get into the games industry, as Chris was saying, is it's better to start small and use the tools around you. Not sure where I'm going with that. Anyway, and just keep testing. Do something small, test it out, see if it works, test it on people. So my process for AvCon was I actually made a demo of the game first, and I presented it last year. And then I then took the feedback that I got from people to create a full build, which I then presented this year. And I might go through some of the tools that I used, because I think probably the most important thing you'll get from me is figuring out how I learnt what I learnt. So I guess I started here. Certainly didn't have this 10 years ago. I find that if you know the right question to ask, Google will come back with anything. So Construct 2, to come back to Construct 2, it's a HTML5 based game engine, and it's very, very graphically based. So the best thing about it for me was I had an idea, I had a concept for a game that I wanted to make, which was about bees. I had a basic idea of the control scheme, which was, like Snake, but then it goes backwards. And then I downloaded Construct 2 and started messing around with it. The good thing about Construct is it's got an amazing user base that are really, really generous. And so if you don't know how to do something, you can generally find any instruction on how to do anything in lots of different languages, too bundles with it now. So it's a really, really good resource. If you can find a tool like this that having resources online, you can do what I did and essentially just, hammer away at it until you figure it out. So with Construct, I don't know if there's any images of what it looks like, but it's very similar to Photoshop in the sense that you can actually pick up objects and drag them onto the screen where you want them to be. And the coding is really, really simple because you don't have to know how to program specifically. You just have to know the logic of whatever commands you want to put in. And that was really good for me because I could very easily test out concepts without knowing if I put the full stop in the right place and that kind of thing. So not having any background in programming, this was a really, really good tool for me. And from that, I started learning more JavaScripting to try to push the software a little bit more. And I did that. You guys might be familiar with Codecademy. Has anyone used Codecademy before? Yes? Okay, so basically this is a really good online tool, and there are lots of different programming things online where often a lot of them are free. There are really good resources that you can find that you don't necessarily have to study. I probably would have benefited from studying like Chris did at uni or even in high school, but there are still resources out there for people who haven't had that opportunity. and it's just a matter of having the energy and the drive to just keep going, keep experimenting. So I started learning JavaScript on Code Academy. Found that I'm finding it really, really interesting. So I thought, okay, I'll keep working on my game. I'll keep learning coding and see where I go from there. What's come out of that is I've probably only got a couple of minutes left. Essentially, when I was at AppCon this year, I was approached by a producer who asked me to work on another game, and she said, "Do you know how to use Unity?" And I said, "No, but give me a few weeks and I'll figure it out." And so same thing happened again. I got onto the website. Oh, does everyone know what Unity is? Yes, a few people. So Unity 3D is a game engine. It's another game engine that's free to download. You don't have to pay for it until you start making a certain amount of money, or there are pro versions you can pay for, but you can download it for free. It's a 3D game engine as opposed to Construct, which is a 2D based engine. Similarly though, they have amazing online tools. They have tutorials on YouTube. It's all really, really easy to learn how to use. It uses JavaScript as well, but in order to get the most out of it, I started learning C#, and that was about 3 months ago. So I've now since finished that particular game that I was making in C#, but just goes to show that if you can find the information online, you can pretty much do anything. And I guess that's been my pathway. If you want to learn something, generally you can find information online. And that sounds like a really, really silly thing to say, but there are so many tools and resources out there that weren't there 10 years ago. It's the whole pathway to getting a game up on the store. I'll show you where. It's really democratized, so you don't have to go through a publisher anymore. The cool thing about being an indie developer is you've got control of everything, and you create something. If you told me 5 years ago that I'd have a game up on the Play Store, I wouldn't have even known where to start. And I managed, to find out all I needed to online. So that's kind of my pathway. I don't really know that I can get into a lot more if I've got a minute left, but essentially I guess that's why I asked me here today to talk about my alternative experience. And so yeah, I'm also conscious that there are not a hell of a lot of girls in game development, or so I've heard. So
that's true.
Yes, I like to try to encourage people to get into it. If you're into art, go down the art pathway. If you have a programming background, awesome.
Don't worry, it's just kid. Just maybe wait for the two. It's not the alarm. Yeah.
Cool. All right. Yeah. So.
Yeah. Number 26.
Yeah. Mutual background or something. Yeah. So I mean.
Before you stop, I just thought it might be worthwhile just going into some questions. So I thought it was really interesting that Andrada had self-taught just about everything, and I think that's scary for us teachers. That for me, it's sort of like, wow, where is my role as a teacher, especially in this whole area of computer science and programming, where the industry is begging for jobs. So I think for teachers, it's really interesting to reflect. And I guess my question to you then would be a bit like how I was asking Chris on Skype. Where do you see us as high school teachers promoting, students getting into it? Where did you find your spark? It obviously was a bit after high school to get into game development, but how do you see us fitting in the role in terms of teachers pushing kids towards learning coding for the first time?
Sure. I mean, I think knowing where to start is always really important. I certainly didn't, and so that's why I kind of ended up with this. Well, it's not a huge game, but it's a mammoth project for me because I didn't have any sense of boundaries at the time, and then I sort of got so far into it, I just have to finish it now. But basically, having sort of some guidelines of where to start is really good. Pointing people towards particular tool sets and being able to identify, I guess, in people where their strengths are, and say, okay, you're really good at this, so just jump straight into that program, or you're really good at artwork, so have a think about how you might fit into the industry that way. So I think it's important to, and just encourage people to spend their spare time. And that's what I've done essentially, because it's not been part of any course. It's just out of pursuing my own interests. So I think you can inspire people in an educational setting, and then they'll take that and they'll go off and do extra bits and pieces. They'll go and do their own projects like Chris did, and keep experimenting. And those are the guys that will end up.
And obviously, this is something that you intend on pursuing for a while yet now.
Yes, absolutely. I'm hoping to move into game development full time, and hopefully be able to speak about it better in the future too. But that's kind of my current goal.
Any questions from the teachers? Just finish up.
Andrada, would you talk to your teachers about what you were doing in your spare time?
When I was at school, or
Looking back now, just because of doing what you're doing, would you have told your teachers what you were doing in your spare time?
if I was doing this back then, high school was so long ago.
No, the reason why I'm asking is because as teachers, and I know what you're saying, Emil, is that our job isn't, I'm not scared at all, you know, but my job now would be, well, okay, what can I credit you now? What that you're currently doing and you've already done, how does that meet the assessment criteria, and what can I sign you off on?
Okay.
So, but if you don't have that conversation with your teachers, show them what you've been doing at home, there's a missed opportunity.
Yeah, that is sorry, I'll jump in and then feed it to you. I'm conscious we've got to get you coding in a second. Can we hold that question for a second? I think that's worth discussing probably as we look at the workshop after, but I'll not forget to get the floor and talk about that. Are you going to stick around for the code jam? You can help people maybe for 5 minutes? Yeah, because you're doing pretty good. So can we just give Andrada a big round of applause?